never wake up one day and think, man, today's the day I'm going to walk away from my W-2. You never feel that way. And so it's always a leap of faith that you just have to make at some point. And I remember like how hard that was for me. And it wasn't just the security of a W-2, but I genuinely loved what I did. And I just felt like I needed to do something. I needed to do something new. I needed to build something that was mine. And
hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today, we've got Matt Lavinder with New Again Houses. Matt flew in from Bristol, Tennessee. Talk about how he turned his real estate business into 47 franchise locations in 23 states. I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on the show alone isn't enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And the show is brought to you by our sister company, InvestorLift. Get access to millions of cash buyers across the country. Go to investorlift.com, put in Disruptors to get 10% off. And guys, if you get value out of the show, please hit that subscribe button. That way we can all grow together. You ready?
yeah.
All right. So first question is, what was your life like right before getting into real estate?
Well, the simple answer to that is I was a college soccer coach. But that story goes back to the beginning. That's this intertwined journey of sports and business, and all of it's been transferable to real estate.
Yeah, I love aspects of sports and coaching and how it translates into real estate. So you were, at that time, when you got into real estate, coaching college?
Yeah, I was coaching college soccer. I loved it. Like, I think when you're a coach, when you've got that in your DNA, it's there with you. You can't leave it. And so I really enjoyed the coaching. The problem with college coaching is a very small part of it's actually coaching. A lot of it is bureaucratic. A lot of it is administrative. The recruiting's a lot. But what really made me move on to something else was the feeling that I couldn't fully spread my wings without being dependent upon someone else. And so an athletic director or a middle manager at the university, I felt like was dictating my future. And I would imagine a lot of people feel like that in their job.
Right. Yeah, most people definitely do. That's why I couldn't stick around. So then did you have that feeling and then you pursued something different, or did you find real estate and then you decided it was time for a change?
Well, the real estate goes back. It goes back to my childhood, really, because I grew up in a small town. I was the first. I think I was the first male in my family who didn't go to work at the local factory, and my whole childhood I was told, "You're going to go to college so you don't have to work at Eastman," which is the big chemical factory there in our area. And so that's all I heard. That's all I heard all my life. And so my father was an entrepreneur at heart. Like, he had the heart of an entrepreneur, but he didn't have the opportunity to spread those wings. And so he had some small businesses. He had a couple of franchises. One of them turned into a Dairy Queen. And I saw how hard he worked and how entrepreneurial his spirit was and how happy he was there. But he always told me that the best investment he ever made was buying an apartment, and he lived in half of it and then rented the other half. And that's really how he got started. And I think that's what put him on a path to a middle class life. And I never forgot that
So he was
about real
house-hacking
estate. Yeah,
decades ago.
Yeah, in the early 70s. Yeah. And I remember him saying that, and all the things that he tried and he did, he always told me that was the most important investment that he ever made.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So getting into soccer, this is trajectory. Did you have like a soccer? Did you play a lot of soccer, and then and then once that career ended, then you went to coaching, or was this?
Yeah.
You do in middle school, and you just kind of the winds just kind of push you that way.
Yeah. No, man. I played every sport when I was little, like everything: football, basketball, baseball, soccer, and played 5 sports in middle school. So that was my life. Like that was where I learned. That's where I learned life. You know, I learned a lot of life lessons in the baseball dugout, and you learn so much about life that you probably shouldn't know in a football locker around the football team. But I remember my fifth grade teacher had a parent teacher conference with my mom, and teacher said, Matt's got to learn that life isn't just a game.
She was wrong.
Well, yeah, I've been trying to prove her wrong, but I do think she was right. There is a lot to life that's not a game. But so then in high school, you know, your heroes and your influences are usually sports figures.
Athletes.
Yeah. And I think back to, you know, how much those heroes influenced me, and maybe even values and approach to life. I was a massive Dennis Rodman fan, and
really?
not because of the off the court stuff, but because but man, the relentlessness that
Tenacity.
the guy had on a basketball court, and just the hunger to get the rebound. He was so inspiring to me. Like, I grew up a Celtics fan, and I remember him shutting down Larry Bird in the playoffs. I was like, man, those Pistons, that's a great team to watch. And so anyway, those guys ended up being, you know, you idolize them in high school, you idolize your parents. And then I went on to school. I majored in accounting because accounting was just easy to me, and somebody told me that would be a good career. And then I went all the way through school, did an internship in accounting the summer before my senior year. I hated that internship. And like to this day, accounting is the least favorite thing I do in my life.
That resonates with me. Yeah. So then what pushed you into real estate?
Well, so that, when I finished that, I did that internship before my senior year of college. And so, man, it's a little too late to change. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So I went to graduate school, still not knowing. I fell in love with history in graduate school and coaching. So I had some opportunities at Duke to coach, and it was just a great opportunity. So I got into coaching and teaching in graduate school. And then right out of graduate school, I started coaching and teaching at the college.
Right.
And so I did that for 12 years. And you know, coaching you just learn so much.
Yeah.
In coaching. And part of it is seeing what kids can be rather than just who they are.
Right.
So you see these 18-year-olds, and it's like, I can see that there's something in there. And then you spend 4 years trying to help them
tap into it.
Tap into it. Well, it's not all that unlike what we do now, right?
It's not.
Like that's the heart of it. But you learn so much because, you know, in coaching, one of the things I miss about coaching is the feedback. Like when you're coaching in college, you either win or you lose, and there's a scoreboard.
Oh yeah,
and it's pretty clear whether you've been successful or not.
It's a very tight feedback loop.
And then you give an interview after, and you got to explain it. And so you don't have that in business. Like, it's a long-term thing, and so I do miss that about coaching. But it forces you to pivot. Like, it forces you to acknowledge mistakes. And I think that's one of the things I really learned from coaching, and has been really transferable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you did it for 12 years. So why?
Yeah. So
why into real estate?
Yeah. So we started. My wife and I had always, just from my childhood, knowing that real estate was what it was and the opportunity that it was. We started fixing up some rentals, and so I remember our kids would be in diapers on the floor. My wife would be doing tile work, and I'd be doing whatever. I'm not really useful. And so, but I was there. And so we'd fix up a few houses, rent them out on a really small scale. And then in 2007, I realized that I didn't want to continue coaching. I felt like I was living in I explain it as feeling like I was in a box that was too small.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to spread my wings and build a business where if I succeeded or I failed, it was because of me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't because of some vice president or some CFO in an office that was going to dictate my success or not.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to build a business. I wasn't passionate about flipping houses. What I was passionate about is building a business that could flip houses.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2007, there just weren't many sophisticated players out there.
There were not a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah, it was a mom and pop cottage industry. Everybody was doing one or two with their HELOC. It just wasn't sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's like, can we turn this into a business? And so that's what I've always been passionate about is the business side of that product.
So you already had rentals before you changed careers.
Yep.
So you were working as a coach. You had assets. They were cash flowing.
Yeah.
And so that kind of probably gave you some more freedom.
Yeah.
To pivot.
It did give me freedom, but it's never easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that shift, like I knew that I wanted to transition from coaching full time to doing real estate full time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew there was opportunity in this, but that is not easy. Like you never wake up one day and think, man, today's the day I'm going to walk away from my W-2, right? Like you never feel that way. And so it's always a leap of faith that you just have to make at some point. And I remember like how hard that was for me. And it wasn't just the security of a W-2, but I genuinely loved what I did. And when
the coaching aspect,
the coaching part of it, and even the teaching part of it, like I taught history,
but not the bureaucracy.
Not the bureaucracy. Yeah. And I just felt like I needed to do something. I needed to do something new. I needed to build something that was mine. Mm-hmm. And I also realized during that time, I wasn't building something for me. I was building it for somebody else.
Yeah. And this really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, I did enjoy the engineering part. I did.
Yeah.
But only the engineering part.
Yeah.
Right? But I didn't care for being told how to do my job.
Yeah.
Right? And I also knew whether I worked 20 hours a week or 80 hours a week, the paycheck was the same.
Yeah.
And so for me, when people are asking me, like, why are you quitting such a great, cushy job, right, with great benefits, is like, I would rather work somewhere where if I fail, I make zero.
Yeah.
But if I win big.
Yeah.
Right. So that was what was inside me. So when you're talking about like, you know, like you're cornered in and this box is just getting a little too small, like that's kind of how I was feeling.
Yeah.
Most of my career when I was at Intel.
Yeah. But it's hard to leave, right? Like,
it wasn't hard for me. Only because for myself personally, young, single, no responsibilities. My only responsibility was my mortgage payment. That was the only responsibility.
Yeah, that makes it easy. Most people aren't in that situation.
Right.
Like we just had our third child.
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you got kids.
Yeah, you're not making that decision just for yourself. You're making it for people who didn't sign up to be an entrepreneur and take risks. Right?
I remember when the last day when I was walking out, so many of my fellow engineers were like, we're envious, we're jealous. Like, we wish we could do this.
Yeah.
But we can't, right?
Yeah.
They got the golden handcuffs.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sad. You know, it's sad in a way because the window doesn't stay open forever. Like the longer you stay there, especially in that field, the longer you stay, the harder it is. The harder it is to leave. But I also, you know, looking back, once I realized that I wanted to do something more, that like my ambition was different, I started to resent that job. Mm-hmm. And once you begin to resent something, you're never going to be happy with it. Like that never, I found when you start resenting it, like there's no moving forward with it. Yeah.
Well, another thing you talked about is like, you didn't want to flip. You wanted to build a business that'll flip. That's not a language that's very common back in
No.
07, right? But again, this resonates with me. Like, I'm not trying to make the show about me, but like the joke I've made is I love everything about real estate except for houses and people,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I just want to own a business that's
Yeah.
super profitable with high margins.
Yeah.
Real estate just happens to fit that box.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that you're saying like this was your thought process.
Yeah.
So you submit your notice. What is it, 07?
Yeah, but it wasn't that instantaneous. Like, I did like 2 jobs those last 2 years. Like, I realized in 2007 that I wanted to move on, but I didn't actually leave until 2010. And what I was doing is I was working during the day, coaching and recruiting. That's a really consuming profession. And then at night, I was digging. Like, I was burning the midnight oil
Getting to the bottom of your reserves.
every night. Yeah, just because I needed to get this going. I needed to get enough momentum to where I could leave without
You're creating
having
a
the
path.
risk. Yeah. And it was tough. Like, it was long, exhausting hours. But I think people sometimes have to go through that unless you've got a big nest egg.
Yeah. No, you got to go through the suffering season.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if you don't suffer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about recruiting. Where were you coaching?
At King University.
King
Yeah,
University.
in Tennessee.
So we had a conversation some time ago, the last couple of months. Like Deion Sanders has been all over
Yeah.
right, the sports
Yeah.
pages.
Yeah.
And someone was saying like he's a great coach and great leader and this and that. And my opinion, and I'd like to get your opinion on this because you've lived that world.
Yeah.
Is I'm not discounting his ability to coach or his ability to lead. I'm not discounting any of that. But my argument is that he's just the best marketer, right? Recruiting is getting people to raise their hands. Recruiting is inspiring people to want to follow you. So I'd like to get your perspective on that, on my perspective.
Yeah. I think recruiting college athletes is very similar to sales and anything else. And it's about telling a story. But it's not just telling the story. It's about having a big enough vision that people want to be a part of it. And I think he's really good at that. Like, he thinks big. He draws a picture of what he wants this to be, and then he tells a story. And he's gotten talented 18-year-olds to want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So I think this being a gifted storyteller like he is, it's hard to separate his recruiting ability from his leadership ability. Because what I sense is the kids that he's got there, once you recruit them, you still have to inspire them.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't get easier
No.
when you get
That's just step one.
yeah, you get like he's got 80 type A 20-year-old men in a locker room. Like, it doesn't get any easier. And so now it becomes like recruiting them to play off the same playbook and so the recruiting never ends.
So in the recruiting component, how much is that translated into running a business?
Man, there's so many overlaps with coaching and business. I think coaching is a lot teaching. I don't think I've ever seen a great coach who wasn't also a gifted teacher. I think that's what separates the great coaches is they're really good teachers. And I think that's so.
When you say teach, do you mean like teaching concepts, teaching life lessons, teaching the development of a play? Like, what kind of teaching are we talking about?
I think all of those, some coaches are better at some of those than others, but I think back to the best coaches that I've had, they were able to teach the fundamentals. They were just really good teachers. And you see guys at the highest level, and they just have that ability. And it's an empathy, it's a leadership, it's just this teaching ability that not everybody has. Like, you think about the average coaches, they might know their sport, but they're not great teachers. And so I think that ability to teach is important for coaching. But in business, like, if you're building a business that is bigger than yourself, right, which is what ultimately I think we want we want to do is build something bigger than ourselves. It's probably why you wanted to leave your engineering job, right? You wanted to build something bigger than you. If you're going to do that, then you've got to teach at some point. And teaching, I see teaching as empowering other people.
Yeah.
You know, and empowering them, trusting them to spread their wings. And hopefully, if you do it well, they end up doing it better than you.
Yeah.
So I jumped in this real estate thing with flipping houses, and I learned it. I just dove in. I don't have skills myself. I am not a contractor. I'm not useful with a hammer. But I learned the business. I learned the numbers. I learned what pieces you need to flip a house, the people that you need to flip a house, how the numbers work. And I tried to create systems around that so that I could build a business that didn't depend on me.
Yeah.
And so that's been a process. And we do 30 houses a year now locally, just in our own corporate headquarters, and they don't let me near a house. Like I haven't seen a house since before COVID.
Yeah.
And if I go near one, they start throwing stuff at me because I just get in the way.
Just get out of here.
But they have become better at it than me.
Right.
Like every facet, they are better at it than I am.
I love what you're talking about here as far as teaching. The difference between great coaches and the not so great coaches is the ability to teach. Something that we've been harping on recently is we're moving away from a learning organization to a teaching organization, right? Because if we're teaching the lessons, there's a greater amount of responsibility and ownership from the leaders.
Yeah.
Right. If there's a learning organization, you go learn what you learn. I'll go learn what I. Maybe we do a book club, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But if it's a teaching organization, then the expectation is once I teach it to you, I'm examining, are you getting it? Right? Are you getting it? Are you committed to executing it?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a greater onus on the owners if it's a teaching organization, because now the expectation is not just here's the login, here's the course, here's the book. All right, get out there and go crush it.
Yeah.
Now it's like there's feedback here.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. And going back to coaching and Dion, like if he doesn't teach it well, it's not the player's problem, right? It's his problem. So he's invested. And I do think that a lot of our learning platforms today have become so transactional that there isn't that long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And so when we started doing franchising, franchising is coaching. Like I didn't realize that when I got into it. Like I just didn't understand. But franchising is all about coaching. And so you have to learn how to teach at scale.
Yeah.
And
you need to transfer all the knowledge base out of your head.
Man, franchising, that was the hardest thing. Because with a franchise, you have to be able to explain what you know to a stranger and do it efficiently and at scale. Right? That sounds easy. That is not easy because you don't realize how much is in your brain until you try to explain it to a stranger.
Yeah.
Like even things like what do you call, like terminology, right? So there were 3 of us in the office when we started franchising, and we would have terminology that was loose. It was vague. Like we might call it one thing one day and one thing another.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work in franchising.
Yeah, ARV, market value, retail. Which one are we talking about?
Yeah. So it forces you to like really understand your own knowledge and give everything a name. And the formulas have to be the same here as they are there. And then teach them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, language is one of the most important tools. We don't really recognize it, but it's one of the most important tools for communicating.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and but it's work. Like it is work because so much that we have accumulated, especially when you become good at something, you just take so much for or you become knowledgeable or an expert on something.
You just expect someone else to get it.
Yeah, and you take it, you take it for granted.
Well, I mean, before we go back to your journey, right? Like we were talking about the ability to empathize and teach. One thing that we talked about is like, why I feel qualified to be a sales trainer is because I just tell everyone because I was awful at it, right? Like Michael Jordan tried coaching. He wasn't very effective at coaching. Yeah. He couldn't teach it. Yeah. Because he couldn't empathize. Yeah. Why they struggled. Yeah. I mean, do you believe in that? Like that's what I've said. I'm just interested in what your thoughts are on that.
I think there are people that are born teachers that it comes a lot easier to them. Yeah. I think it's a very difficult thing to learn, and I think it can be learned, but I think it takes a lot of work and commitment to learn how to do that if you're not good at it. Yeah. It's just because teaching is so much about seeing the world from someone else's perspective. Like that's where the empathy part of it. Yeah. Empathy part of it comes. And Michael Jordan, I don't think empathy was ever his strong suit, right?
He was not known for most empathetic player of the year. Yeah. Empathetic player of the year. He was never won.
never won that one.
Yeah. Another thing too, before we sorry, I apologize. Just keep adding these things. Like I'm really appreciating this conversation. Yeah. The part about being able to download what's in your brain. Like there's a running joke. Matthew Potter, myself, he's a host of Pardon the Disruption. Running joke is like the first person that can figure out how to download everything in your brain can be a billionaire practically overnight. Yeah. Right? Just all that tribal knowledge, all that experience. Yeah. How to deal with this problem, that problem. Like we've seen the problems. Yeah. But we can't teach all those things.
Yeah, but if you picture that, like if you could do that tomorrow, you could like download all the information, and it wouldn't be helpful. It would be like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? Not a fire hose, but a fire hydrant. Like if you could download everything that you know in your brain and dump it on me right now, like what would I do with that, right? And so it's much more difficult problem to solve than that. And so the way that we've tackled it, and franchising forces you to do this. And the typical thing that franchises have done historically is they'll do an operations manual, right? And it'll be 300, 400 pages. Yeah. And then you invite your new franchisees in for a weekend, and you teach them everything, right? Well, that's the data download. Well, it doesn't work, right? Because I used to teach history, and I remember it was a 6-hour course. It was Western civilization, like all of Western civilization in 6 hours, like over the course of a year. Yeah. All right. Well, that was tough. Well, then they got the bright idea. Well, we can be more efficient. We can do this in one semester. So they jump it in one semester. Well, you can't learn that way. No. Like it takes time. Like things have to marinate. And I think the hardest part with real estate is you learn by doing. Yeah. Right? You can't just learn from information. You really have to do it in order to learn. And so that's one of the challenges that we've been trying to solve. And so we've created this kind of interactive process for teaching, where we teach from a lot of different mediums. And so some of it's written, but it's written on a digital platform where they get bite-sized pieces. And so we call it the flip simulator. And so we teach flipping, but I call it like breadcrumbs. Like we give them little bits at a time, learn that, and then you move on. But it's not just words. There's also like simulations where you walk through a house and you evaluate it, and then small group sessions and large group sessions, one-to-one coaching. Like it takes all of those different things, right? And if you go back to coaching, like you can't teach someone to play football out of a manual, right? Like it's the team teaches them how to play at a high level, but you've got position coaches that do small group, and you do technical, you do tactical, you do the film room, you practice, you play. Like all of these different inputs are required to teach someone to do something at a high level. Yeah. And that's it's a real challenge.
It is. So let's go back to your story. So you work for 3 years to build out reserves.
Yeah.
So that you can
Yeah.
go and do your thing. So 2010,
Yeah.
you quit.
Yeah.
How long from when you quit till you realize you had to franchise or you were going to start a franchise?
Yeah. And that quitting, it wasn't just financial. Like when you're a coach, like that's your identity.
Yeah.
Like maybe, I'm sure engineering was part of your identity,
It was.
but like people referred to me as coach. Like all of my relationships was a coaching relation. Like it was hard to walk away from that, just from that part of it. But when I did, we started flipping houses. We started in a small area, and we were up to about 10, 15 in our town, and then
10 or 15 ongoing flips or
10
rentals?
or 15 flips. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We just started flipping. Like we've accumulated some rentals along the way, but for the most part, we've been flipping through these years. And so I brought in somebody year one to help me, and he became my right-hand person. He's fantastic. He's been with me. Sam Ferguson has been with me from the very beginning, and he's still with me and driving.
So before the franchise, Sam was with you.
Yeah. So this was like 2011. So I took a when I sorry to go back to this transition, but I think those of us on the other side of that, like when we've gone full time with something that we're passionate about, and we have the privilege to do something that we're good at full time, I think we take for granted like how hard it is to make steps, like to get there, like going back to that time, those first steps toward that, like, but they're hard, man, like emotionally, risk, financially, all of that. And so I remember I set up a home office, and we just had our third child, and it was an open floor plan, right? It's that everybody's building an open floor plan in 2008 or whatever, and that's what we had. And so I set up my office right there in the middle of the house, and it was January. Things went all right, and then spring break came, and I'm trying to do deals, and 3 kids running through the house with no walls. It's like I learned to appreciate walls that summer. I was like, I can't do this from home. Like I'm not wired this way. So we bought an old roofing shop that was about 300 square feet plus a garage, and I renovated that roofing shop, and it was just big enough to put 4 desks in there. But I was the only one. But I put 4 desks in there, knowing that my goal was to fill that little roofing shop up because I wanted it to be bigger than me. And so Sam came. He trusted the vision, and he was one, and we filled that up.
Yeah.
And then we began expanding to towns about 30, 45 minutes away. And when we did that, it forced us to really tighten up our systems and our processes. So really process-based. We try to turn a flip into a math problem. And but there's people involved. So it's not always just a math problem, right? But we started doing flips in neighboring areas. Well, what that changed is now you can't be on site for those flips, right? So now your terminology has to be better. You really have to empower the contractors because you can't be there to manage them.
Right.
And so that experience forced us to tighten that up. And so even though they were only 45 minutes away, it forced us to make our systems and our processes better. Well, we kept building that out. It eventually became software. And so those systems and processes really became too big for what we were doing locally, and franchising just made sense. And so in 2015, we started that journey on franchising.
So you quit in 2010, and then you franchised in 2015.
We started thinking about franchising in 2015. So we had to build that out. So there's the legal, there's and again.
Well, so I want to get into that later on.
Yeah.
So before we do that, so you decided to go. When you quit, how many flips were you doing at that time?
Oh gosh, I was probably doing maybe 3, 4 a year.
Okay, so you went from 3 or 4 to 15 ongoing.
Yeah.
Okay, so We talked about the challenges being at home, open concept.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak for myself. Some of my challenges was I was completely directionless.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like when you got a job, you know where you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
when you're supposed to be there, what you're supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
while you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Once I was on my own, I was just kind of like I was doing things,
Yep.
but were they income producing?
Yeah.
Were they the right activities?
Yeah.
You know, am I talking to the right people? Right? There's all these things, challenges I had. So what were some of the biggest obstacles besides an open floor plan?
Well, I think what you're talking about is structure, really, right?
Yeah.
Like when you've got a job, you have structure imposed on you,
Right.
and it's something that a lot of us like push
rebel
back
against it. Yeah.
right? But it's important, like because when you're sitting alone, in a remodeled roofing shop, like you have to start managing your time, and that's not easy because you're at the beginning of a business. You don't really know what's important, so you're making that up. You're making that up as you go, trying to manage your own time, and we tend to do things that we want to do rather than what we need to do.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest villains for entrepreneurs is the urgent. And when you're in that situation, like everything's urgent. And when you're doing the urgent will consume the important,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't, it's hard to know that when you're getting started with something. Like so much of this I've learned over time. And I think we're really bad at managing our time, like all of us. And one of your recent guests, I think it may have been Trevor, talked about that he wasn't disciplined. And he said he imposed a structure on himself, and he didn't take any meetings before 11 o'clock. I started doing that a few years ago.
Yeah.
But it's structure, right? And you don't have that when you're starting out, and
Right.
makes it makes it tough.
For sure.
Yeah.
What are some other like big challenges, things you did not expect at that time?
I would say loneliness. Like you're making big decisions, and like there's no one to talk to. That was before online communities were a really viable thing. And so you're making these big decisions. There's a lot of pressure,
A lot of money on the line.
and it's lonely out there. Yeah, and you don't have friends who are going through this, right? Like
Someone to share your sob stories with.
Yeah. But then it's also like in flipping in particular, like you need to, and this has influenced the way we've created the franchise, is you have to do enough volume to create competitive advantages, but you're limited on your volume because of your capacity, right? Your systems are limited, your capital is limited, your what we call a construction ecosystem is limited.
Yeah.
Everything is limited, but you've got to establish enough volume to where you can create some competitive advantages because it's competitive out there.
Right. Super competitive.
Yeah.
I
would imagine the same is true with wholesaling.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
absolutely. No,
yeah.
You got to create your competitive advantages. So you said you wanted to create a business that flipped houses. You didn't want to flip houses.
Yeah.
What kinds of questions were you asking yourself with that mindset? Because not everyone starts a career with that mindset, right? Everyone starts off like, I want to do this. And then it's like, oh, I actually don't want to do this. I want to do this.
Yeah.
Right? So you went in there intentionally with, I want to build a business that flips houses. What kinds of questions were you asking yourself to go in that direction?
Well, a couple of things. I think the easy part for me is I didn't have the skills. Like I think a lot of people in that situation would be tempted to grab the hammer and jump in there and get in the business. That wasn't an option for me because I wasn't skilled. So I had to build a business if I was going to do this. There are things I could have done outside of real estate, but I was pretty strategic on picking real estate because I think the product is important. If you're going to build a business, the product is important. And I see a lot of talented people, like talented salespeople, that pick the wrong product. Like they pick a low margin product that sets them up for failure. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think the same, that has always attracted me to real estate. And I think it goes back to seeing my parents and the small businesses that they had. Like they had a t-shirt shop and a popcorn shop and an ice cream and shoes. And I just saw them work so hard and they were so talented. But the product, like, it's tough, man. Like, those are tough products. The margin just isn't there, especially in a smaller town like we were. So I saw them like work so hard for every dollar. And I didn't want to do it that way. And real estate is unique. And everybody knows that most of the millionaires that you come in contact with, they probably made it through real estate.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because you can leverage real estate, right? I didn't have money, but if I'd tried to do this with shoes, no one would have loaned money against shoe inventory, right? But real estate's different. It's unique. It's unique that way.
It's there was an ice cream shop in downtown Chandler, not that far from here, Sammy's. We loved it.
Yeah.
Right? And one day it just shuts down. And I remember when I was there, it's like, there's no way this place stays in business.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Yeah.
Right? I'm paying $3-4 for ice cream sandwiches.
Yep.
For me, my wife, my 3 girls, not a lot of revenue. And then they're teenagers, so they operate with the efficiency of teenagers.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not a franchise.
Yeah.
So they operate with the efficiency of teenagers. So like it's taking like 10, 15 minutes to get $20 from me.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking around all these expenses and like, there's no way this stays in business. So I remember when it went out of business, one of my daughter's teachers was like sad, she liked it as well. So I sit down with my daughter, like, why do you think it went out of business? She's like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't that popular. It's like, okay, so let's remember when we were there.
Yeah.
Remember how long it took.
Yeah.
How much revenue they're generating. How much do you think those teenagers are making? How much do you think the lease is on a space like this?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the utilities.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, like, why would you sell a low margin product? You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And low margin products usually have to come with high volume.
Must come with high volume.
That's more people.
Yeah.
And the more people, the
chaos.
harder it is, right? So yeah.
So in 5 years, so when you had conversations and thoughts about starting the franchise, you said in 2015, it was at that point you were flipping 15 houses at a time?
Yeah, it was about that. It was between 15 and 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the question you were asking yourself where the answer was, I need to franchise this?
I think I felt like we had built such robust systems and processes, and they were really good, but they were built on spreadsheets, like really intricate spreadsheets, but they were good, and we were getting pretty good. We were getting pretty good at this, and but it's almost like we'd built this foundation that was bigger than our market, and it was like I didn't feel comfortable scaling our business much further in our small market just because of the risk of having so many houses in one market. But then we had this asset of all these processes, and so Mark Pate came to me and he said, "Man, I think you need to franchise this."
And who's Mark?
So Mark has headed up our capital fund. And so that's an important piece of this. And so we've created a capital fund that helps our franchise owners on the capital side so that they can scale their business. So he's the one that came up with that idea. And I fought it for probably a year, and then we finally started the process with franchising. And that, like, people go into franchising thinking they're going to take the business that they do, and then it's just going to be an extension of that. What they don't understand is that being a franchisor is a completely different business.
Yeah. In what way?
So, like the New Again Houses local, the development side of it, the part that's flipping houses, was it was good at what it did. It was good at flipping houses. But to be a franchisor, it's not flipping more houses. It's becoming a completely different role. So now you become a teacher, you become a coach, you become all of these things that as a friend, it has nothing to do with what you were good at flipping houses. And so fortunately, they didn't need me to flip houses. So Sam's really good. He's better at it than me. Annie came in, she's became better at it than me. And so they were able to continue that business. And because I hadn't put myself in the middle of it and I made myself expendable, then it allowed me to really throw myself into building the franchise.
Yeah.
And so they continued that. They continued the work and then I just really went all in on building the franchise.
Which is really what you love to do anyway, coaching.
It is. Yeah. Like I didn't love flipping houses, but I do love coaching.
Yeah. And so like, and that's not myself as well, right? Like someone was asking me at an event the other day, they're like, why do you coach, right? Because I think the perception is that you coach for money. And I'm not saying the money is bad.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not complaining about the money.
Yeah.
But I coach because I love teaching.
Yeah.
I love serving. I love watching people take a concept. You see a light bulb go off. You see them go make this change. You can see the changes that's occurring in their lives.
Yeah.
It's so fulfilling and rewarding. So I want to ask another question here. You decided to franchise. I have a couple of peers that also own franchises. And when I've seen that model, I was like, man, that's brilliant. I've been an idiot for doing coaching versus franchising all these years. So I want to ask you, were there conversations between franchising versus coaching?
Yeah, I am not a. That's a good question. I'm trying to think back to that, and I think we looked at different options for that space for flipping houses. If we were just transferring knowledge, then coaching would have been an option. And at that time, there were several gurus that were out trying to teach flipping, and part of what we were doing is kind of a reaction against them. Like we didn't want to be, because it wasn't quality, and we didn't want to do that, and so we wanted to go all in on franchising and do it by the book, be able to have royalties. And, looking back, I think probably could have made a similar influence by coaching. I don't know that I have the personality. I don't know that I have like the skills that you have to promote myself as a coach.
Yeah.
Because that's a skill set, right? And I think we have to understand, and there's so many, it's actually a good question because there's so many different ways that you can make money in real estate.
It's nearly unlimited.
Like you're talking about making however many millionaires. Well, there's a lot of different ways to become a millionaire in this space. And getting good at sales is probably the key to almost all of them. Like you need, that's a common denominator. But if you have those skills, if you have those sales skills, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think it's really important to understand what you're good at. Like what your skill set what your skill set is. If you're good at some things, you're probably not good at others.
Right.
And so what makes you a good coach and have been able to create this platform and this audience, I don't think I have those skills. And so for me, I had to do it from a franchise perspective because I don't put myself out in front of it. So I don't have, so I can do it from I can create these processes. I can coach almost from the background.
Right.
Which fits, it just fits my skill set.
That's actually my persona as well.
Yeah.
But I had a mentor, right, Darren Hardy.
Yeah.
And asked him this question specifically. Right, we were at his event, 2.5-day boot camp, And he was like, you got to be the face of the company.
Yeah.
You got to be like, the company needs a face. The company needs a face.
Yeah.
And if it's not you, it's got to be somebody else, right? And I was like, well, I don't know who else I would want to put as a face.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be the face.
Yeah.
So I asked him, like, hey, you know, like, I don't want to be the face, like, you know, but I don't have anyone else. I think I should be the face. Like, what do you think? And basically his answer was too bad. Right? If you want your business to be successful, either you need to be the face or you need to pick someone else. And if you can't think of anybody else, it's you.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long did it take you to work through that?
Not too long, only because once I know the path to victory, I can quickly adjust my direction. In fact, my downside probably is not the ability to change direction. My downside is probably I change directions too often. Right?
Yeah.
The ability to take something to its eventual end is probably my greatest weakness. That's why I have so many people around me, because they're all great at finishing these ideas in our heads.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so you decided to franchise. Talk to me about franchising. Let's just say I decide I'm going to start a Real Estate Disruptors franchise. What's involved in creating a franchise?
Yeah, so I've been absorbed in the franchise industry now for several years, and I've learned so much from the franchising world because it's just a much more mature business than like anything like the real estate business that we're in.
Yeah.
Because like we said, like in 2007, this is a mom and pop industry. There's nobody sophisticated in real estate investing. I mean, Carlton Sheets and a few others maybe back then that were out there. But franchising, like that's a really mature business. Like there's a lot of history and data and expertise, generational knowledge in franchising. And so being able to be around that and tap into that has been really useful. But I think everyone underestimates all that has to go into to a franchise. And so it starts with the legal, because it is very regulated. And coming from the real estate industry, which is not that, like
it's Wild West.
Yeah. So we take that for granted in real estate, though, right? Like in franchising, it's not like that. Like you have to have your franchise disclosure document. You have to. There's just so every state has different things, and so you've got to manage all of that. And then there's franchise attorneys that are really good at that. And then the way you sell a franchise is regulated. So there's certain things, like there's a lot of certain things that I can't say because it would cross that line. And so there's the whole legal part that takes quite a bit of time to work through. And it's like any other business, but like that you're creating those documents when you don't really know what they should be. So there's a lot of ways to get that wrong in the beginning. And so there's the legal part, but then there's the things that you take for granted, like the things we talked about before, like the things that are in your head that you think are common sense. They're not common sense, right? And so you've got to name them, and then you've got to create a platform for people to learn it. But then there's also just the responsibility. And I know you feel this with coaching as well. Like people invest in the coaching program. You take ownership in that. You feel responsible. And so we feel such responsibility for this franchise community that we have. And so you're constantly trying to invest in the system and making it better. And so there's a lot that everybody that starts a franchise underestimates the time that it takes and the money that it takes to build it out.
Yeah.
Because you think it's just an extension of the business you're doing.
Right.
It is a completely different business.
Well, this is like, the E-Myth, right? Where she talks about like, well, I love baking pies, so I'm going to start a pie store.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a bakery.
Yeah.
Right? It should be easy. The skills should just translate.
Yeah. And then she becomes a franchisor, and she's not making pies at all.
Right. Exactly. So what you were selling, you're no longer selling that.
Yeah.
So can you say roughly, again, if I were to start a franchise, my understanding, the limited research I've done, right, it's like 30 to 50K to get it even just approved by the federal government.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not even like before selling it
Yeah.
or getting the financing or the I guess it's just money wise. Like before we even try to sell anything or even talk about, hey, I'm doing this.
Yeah. That might get you the document that you can file at the federal level.
Right.
It's probably not the right document. It takes several versions to get it right. There's just so many ways you can make a mistake. And a franchise agreement it's a 10-year agreement. So that first franchise agreement that you make, like that's binding for 10 years.
Yeah.
So that part of it's difficult. But then there's just the systems, and you're right, like the sales process is not inexpensive because your salespeople have to understand franchise law.
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot, and like I think it's a lot of the bureaucracy that we probably ran away with to start with.
But this bureaucracy we have to put up with. You can't get around this one.
Yeah. But
So,
it's also really rewarding, and it's been so much like coaching. Like there's just so many transferables between the coaching of sport and a franchise. It's a community. You're really invested in one another's success. Like we chose to have protected territories, which is not usually the case in real estate franchises. Like the typical model is you would sell as many as you could in Atlanta or Nashville. We wanted to have protected territory. So our territories are usually 500,000 people. And we did that because we didn't want our franchise owners competing against one another. We wanted to build a community where their interests were aligned.
Yeah.
And so that part of it has probably been one of the more rewarding parts. Is every time you bring in a new franchise owner, they bring something with them. Like they bring an expertise from a different career, and they make the system better.
Tell me about the first franchise you sold. So 2015, you have a conversation. 2016 is legal.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first one that signed up.
Yeah. So we did a pilot, and so we had a guy, a recent graduate, Eric Wilkening, who interned in our office during school, and then he started working for us. And so he really learned the business. We thought, let's set him up in Charlottesville, Virginia, and let's trial this. Like by him doing it, we'll learn where the weaknesses are. And so we did that. We did that for about a year, and we learned a lot. He gave great feedback. He helped build a lot of the processes. And so that really helped. And then the next year is when we launched. And so that's when I think we had him plus 4 other people that came in that year. And that year we did the whole manual and a weekend in the office drinking from a fire hose. And it didn't work.
Well, yeah.
And so we quickly pivoted to a different approach. And that's when we started building out the training part of it.
Yeah. So, if I'm a prospect, I guess before we can do that, how do you find people that are interested in buying a franchise?
Yeah. So the persona, one of the things that I've learned in marketing is that you really need to have a persona. Like who is your target? Who is your target for this? And that's tough in franchising too, because you really don't know in the beginning. And we were surprised.
Yeah.
Like our assumptions were, reality is different than we assumed. Imagine that.
What did you think it was going to be?
We thought it was going to be really analytical people that would do it part-time. And as they transitioned out of a job. And what we found is the analytics wasn't as important as the sales. And so it was, you can teach the math, right? Like the software is really good at that.
Yeah.
Like you can put guardrails for people.
You don't have to teach them math. You just have to make it so they can't screw it up.
Yeah. Yeah, which is where the software comes in.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but that's where it comes in. But it's the relational skills, the sales skills.
Mm-hmm.
We've just now had enough of a history, because it's still a young system. Like that first group that came in, I think they're in their third or fourth year. And so we've just now had enough history to be able to go back and say, what are the characteristics of our high performers?
Mm-hmm.
And we used franchise tools for that, because franchise world has those tools. Like, that's the sort of thing we don't have in the real estate world.
Yeah.
You know, we can guess, but the franchise world's much more mature, and they can go in and they can say, let's build a profile of what are the skill sets of a franchise owner in this particular business.
Mm-hmm.
So we had enough history to do that, and we've recently done it, and it was really, really interesting. Like, what are the characteristics of our highest performers? And so one of them is self-management,
Mm-hmm.
which you talked about before. You're an entrepreneur. You're on your own. Like, how are you going to manage your time? You don't have a manager telling you how to spend your time.
Right.
So self-management was one. There were three things that were really, really stark: self-management, relationship management. Like, how do you manage relationships? Like, how do you manage conflict? Because flipping a house is you get your hands dirty, right? Like, you've got contractors, there's plenty of opportunities for conflict, but it's also an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to bring people around a common vision.
Yeah.
How you do that, like your diplomacy skills, you know, and how you manage those relationships. That was a real indicator.
Yeah.
The third one, self-awareness. And that one was really interesting to me, because I hadn't thought about it, but now, like, that's obvious.
Yeah, it makes sense when you hear it.
Like, yeah, but self-awareness, that characteristic really separated the highest performers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, thinking back to some of your recent guests, was it Sean Terry?
Sean Terry?
Yeah, Sean Terry talked about the times that he wanted to give up.
Right.
And he talked about that first house and having to go back to the car,
Mm-hmm.
and like, is this for me? But what he described was this process, this ability to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
He sat in that car and he didn't blame someone else. He held his hand up. He said, I'm going to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that moment separates, I think that moment, that ability to understand yourself and understand your role in it. And it often separates successful people. Probably not just in our businesses, but probably in any business. And so then I thought back to the coaching days, and coaching teams. It's like, well, what made the best soccer players?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the most athletic players. Like, that was never an indicator of success.
That's a bonus.
Yeah, it's nice to have. It's not an indicator of success. What was an indicator of success is, did he have the ability that when he made a mistake, that he would raise his hand and say, that was my fault?
Mm-hmm.
Because if an 18-year-old kid has that kind of self-awareness to raise his hand and say, my bad, then that means they're coachable, right?
Right.
They understand that a blind spot was exposed. And if they can have that level of self-awareness, which is really rare in 18-year-old boys, if they can have that level of self-awareness to raise their hand and say, I was wrong, then they're coachable and we can fix it. Well, it's no different with franchise owners or with you or me, right? Like that quality of having self-awareness is so important. And it's almost like the key to solving the other two problems, which is self-management and relationship management.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was listening to a podcast recently. I was scrolling TikTok, and I saw these great shorts.
Yeah.
Right, and it was Tom Bilyeu, Impact Theory, interviewing a CIA spy. It was interesting about the CIA spy's opinion when he was asked, like, what is the number one secret skill like every successful CIA agent has? And the answer he gave was like not what I would expected at all. And it was the ability to have perspective.
Yeah.
Right? The ability to get outside of your head.
Yeah.
And see it from the other person's perspective, but also from a third person perspective. If you can see this from a third person perspective who's not there, right? But what they can see, what maybe the reality of the situation, right? What a third party observer might see. Yeah. What the other person can see. Yeah. Then you at that point have the most valuable skill, apparently, according to him, of a CIA agent. Well, you go that you say relationship, I look at conflict resolution. Yeah. Right? Yep. Conflict resolution. You look at self-awareness and self-management. Yep. I mean, I would argue if you're doing those three things well, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Yeah. What industry, what role, you will be successful. Right. No matter where you are.
Yeah. It's not unique to franchise, but I think some of those skills, it's easier, like self-awareness. I think it's easier for some people than others, but I do think a lot of that can be taught.
Yes, absolutely can be taught.
But it does require structure, and it also requires self-awareness. Yeah, like that, like the ability to hold your hand up and say, "I'm not good at this." But I think they can be taught. And like, for example, that self-management. I thought Trevor did a great job of describing that blind spot that he had and how he did it. And just managing your time as an entrepreneur is so important. And it involves imposing structure on yourself. Yeah. And I think to those of us who are entrepreneurial minded, that seems like something that we fight.
We fight it, but it's easier when we set the structure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Matt comes in, it's like, Steve, here's your structure moving forward. Like, whoa, what are we talking about here? But if you self-imposing structure to put, you were saying earlier, guardrails around yourself, that's a different story. Yeah. And I want to touch on something else too, because we're talking a lot about coaching here, right? And I'm passionate about coaching. One of the things I've said is that the greatest value in coaching is not what I have to say. That's not the greatest value. Yeah. Right? My life experience is not the greatest value in the coaching. Yeah. The greatest value in the coaching is every week for 30 minutes, you and I have a conversation. Yeah. And we sit down and you have to stop what you're doing and you have to introspect. Because I'm going to ask you a handful of questions. Yeah. What have you done well in the last week? Yeah. Right? Because then it might be an opportunity. How can we do that more often? Yeah. What didn't go so well last week? Yeah. We might have an opportunity to stop some things from happening again, right? But my demand upon you, right, because what coaching is, my demand upon you is to stop everything you're doing and for 30 minutes, just think about you and your business. It demands self-awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. And allocate time for it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't commit to that coaching, you wouldn't spend the time on it.
Right.
Right. There would always be something.
There's always something tugging at you.
More urgent. And the urgent will come in and it will steal everything from the important. Like it will consume everything, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you're building stuff. There's always urgent stuff. If you don't protect the important, like you don't have a chance of no one else is going to protect the important.
No.
Like no one else is going to protect what's important to you. Like they're going to consume it because it's urgent to them, right? Like
it's important to them. It's the world to them at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where that structure comes in. And like the weekly coaching call, it allocates time to the important. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're really good at allocating dollars. Like we're good at building a budget. We're terrible at allocating time.
Yeah.
And I've really come to understand this in the past few years is there's always new ways you can make money.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
But you can't make time. Like it's finite. And if your quality of life is 50 hours of work a week, like that's 50 hours. And if you give one of them away, now you've only got 49, right? The only way to increase that is to steal time from your kids.
It is.
But we're not good at that. Like, but I think that's where for me, that's where the structure has come. And that's what I heard from Trevor too. He said, before 11 o'clock, that's my time. I'm going to allocate that time to the important. And my calendar is the same way. Like every day up until 11 o'clock, it's blocked off and it's called the important. And then every hour after that is organized. It's structured, but it's like a budget. I draw my line at about 45 hours a week. And so every one of those hours is important. And so I sat down and I budgeted every one. And that's been life-changing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So going back to how you're finding additional franchise owners, right? Because you're 47.
Yep.
I mean, everything is, at the end of the day, is a sales marketing business.
Yep.
So I'm wondering from the franchise world,
yeah, how
do you market to find potential franchisees?
Yeah. So we're bringing in 1 to 2 new franchisees a month. And we intentionally call them franchise owners rather than franchisees. And franchisees is the term used in the industry, but we don't want them to be passive. And I feel like a franchisee is a passive word. And one of our core values is ownership.
Yeah.
And so we use the term franchise owner. And so we see our job is to empower them and create competitive advantages for them in lead flow, in analysis, capital, building the construction. But it's to empower them. So we use the word franchise owner. So we've it's marketing. It's a very competitive space in franchising. And so, but we've been very narrow, and we don't throw our whole philosophy. This is true on the real estate side too. Is we don't throw just money at the problem. We really try to use a scalpel, and we want to make every marketing dollar go as far as it can. And so, in franchising, it's better understanding our prospects and finding that our target prospect is someone who wants to do 6 to 12 flips a year. And we find that to be a sweet spot because there's financial opportunity there, but there's also, you can have a quality of life.
Yeah.
Once you go beyond one a month, you start to either have to take on overhead and hire people, or you start giving up quality of life.
Yeah.
And so that's our prospect. And it's typically someone who's doesn't have construction skills. It's somebody like me that wants to build a business. And so finding those people, we use Google ads a lot. A lot of the franchise world uses brokers who are almost like agents. We don't use brokers. And so because we don't want to grow too fast either.
Yeah.
We really want to, there's just a lot of different ways to build a franchise.
Sure.
And we found that quality in franchising, that quality is much more important than quantity.
Yeah.
Same is true in flipping too.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely true. Yeah.
We could do 100 flips next year, but probably wouldn't be 100 good flips.
Quality won't be consistent. Yes. So why should I franchise with New Again Houses?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's plenty of options. Right. I think We Buy Ugly is the gorilla.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, they were the first. Yeah. When we started, I think we were the second, and they were the only other ones in the space. But yeah, they're big.
So why should I franchise with New Again Houses?
Yeah. So So when you think about flipping a house, you have to add value or you have the opportunity to add value in a lot of different places along the way. And so wholesalers, for example, go really deep in adding value at the acquisition. So they have to be you guys have to be really, really good at negotiating and lead generation at the acquisition, right?
Yeah.
But to create enough margin in that one value add spot, you have to be really, really good at that. Flipping is different because what we're trying to do is create enough volume so that they can have a competitive advantage. And so in order to be good at any of these things, you need to do multiple houses a year, okay? So the value add is lead generation. So we need to get upstream and get directly to that seller. We can add value there. But that requires a competitive advantage, right? Then once you get the lead, you have to analyze it, and you have to analyze it quickly because you wholesalers are fast, right?
Yeah.
So we have to analyze that lead quickly, but we also have to analyze it accurately.
Yeah.
It's a really small window. So if you get the lead generation right, but you don't have the tools and the sophistication to analyze those deals fast, flipping doesn't work. So you got to but it's another opportunity to add value to the deal. So there's the lead generation, there's the analysis. Once you have those two pieces, the next place that you can add value is with the financing. It's capital intensive. So if we have a location that wants to do 12 a year, that means they need to have 7 in inventory, and over half of those are in construction at any one point. So that's capital intensive. So we have to provide the capital to overcome those constraints to reach a goal like that, right? So but it's another opportunity to add value. So now you've got the lead generation, you got the analysis, you got the capital, but then once all those things are done, now we have to actually add value to the house.
Right.
And I think this is one thing that's different with us than some of the other franchises is we really embrace adding value with construction. And I know that that is seen by some as the most important, the most difficult part. Like, why would you get your hands dirty with that when you can wholesale? But I was also around in 2007. And in my opinion, to survive through all of the market cycles, you need to have the capacity to add value in different ways. And I've always believed that if we can add real value to the house, we can weather through, we can prosper because we have locally. We've gone through all of the cycles now. If you can't add value to the house, there are cycles that are really, really difficult unless you are really good at one of those things.
Yeah.
But to survive a tough cycle and only have one place in that value chain, that makes it tough. So when we think about flipping, we're thinking about doing 6 to 12 deals a year. What does that entrepreneur need? What do they need? What competitive advantages can we provide at every one of those places on the value chain? And that's our job as a franchisor. And so we're adding value on the lead gen side. We're trying to add value on the analysis side with the software, the capital piece, and then the construction execution piece. So it's a lot.
It is a lot. So then you guys offer support in the financing side?
Yeah.
So if I'm a franchise owner and I say, hey, Matt, I got this property, you guys offer some sort of financing options.
Yeah, so it's technically outside the franchise. And so it is not a part of the franchise offering, but we have created an equity, we've created a fund, and it's in excess of $20 million now. And I mentioned Mark Pate earlier, the one who really encouraged us to do franchising is also the one who's built this fund. He's an engineer. And so he's very analytical.
Yeah.
And so he's always valued our analytical approach to flipping houses and valued our numbers. And so that fund only invests in new again projects. And so because the capital limitation is what keeps people only doing one or two a year. But if you're only doing one or two a year, like, you can't create any competitive advantage. Like, how are you going to compete with the wholesalers if you're only doing one or two a year? You have to buy them from the wholesalers, right?
Yeah.
And then the analysis, like, you don't do enough to be able to analyze it well, right? And then the execution. If you're only doing one or two a year, you can't keep contractors loyal to you. Like, you don't control any of the contractors, right?
Yeah.
Now that becomes untenable. And so in a lot of ways, the construction of our business drives the quantity of everything else. Because at the end of the day, that contractor who's swinging a hammer in the house, he is adding value. He's the one adding value. Well, we have to create enough volume to set him up for success.
Yeah.
And so that's why we feel like 6 to 12 a year is a real sweet spot. So you can have that construction ecosystem. Well, what keeps a lot of people from reaching that is the capital piece. And so we knew we had to solve that piece in order to build the competitive advantages.
Right, and it makes sense if someone in your ecosystem is underwriting it the way you're underwriting it.
Yeah.
And they have the processes and procedures for flipping based off your model.
Yeah.
You're a lot more confident.
Yeah.
And getting those deals funded.
Yeah, so that's important because it goes back to speed, right? Like, it's a short window. You get a seller, I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, you get that call, like, you gotta analyze it, and it better be accurate. You got to do it fast.
Well, underwrite it while I'm someone in the office has to underwrite it while I'm on the way to the appointment.
Yeah, and so and then you can't do that, and then maybe I'll get it funded. Like, maybe the money will be there, but that'll be 30 days from now to where I really know. Like, it doesn't work that way.
And that confidence will come across at the appointment if you don't have confidence in the financial backing.
But that's where the software has become so important, and it is cost. Like, anybody that's built software knows how expensive it is. Like,
outrageous.
Way more expensive, like exponentially more expensive than you think it's going to be.
So most things are like 10 times harder. I would say whatever software, at least 100x, whatever you think it is.
For sure. Definitely in dollars, but in time too.
Yeah, whatever you think is going to cost, just 100x it. I mean, what did you think it was going to be? And if you don't mind, like, as a factor.
Yeah. A lot less zeros, like multiples of zeros.
Yeah, and I can only speak on this, right? Because I do have an engineering background.
Yeah.
I did computer science in college. My wife, computer science. My brothers are all computer science. I understand what's involved.
Yeah. Well, you can do software on the cheap.
You can.
It's not.
Now you're trading time for money.
Yeah.
Or money for time.
Yeah. Well, it also what you guys call technical debt, right?
Yeah.
Like, you do it on the cheap now, you're going to pay for it.
When you do it right.
Pay for it later. And when you got a franchise system, like, you can't have bugs, right? Yeah. Like, it goes back. Like, it's important.
Well, just to put it in layman's terms, technical debt in software, right? You do it fast for now, and you'll clean up later. Is like putting poor foundation on the house and fixing the foundation later.
Yeah, and it's just as difficult.
It's just as difficult. All right, well, now we got to fix these different foundations.
Yeah.
Like, it's not as simple like, oh, we'll just fix it later. It's like we got to undo, because there's so many ripple effects and spider webs inside of software.
Man, we could spend a whole nother podcast talking about the similarities of building software and flipping a house.
Yeah.
Like,
But if you haven't gone through it, you don't know.
no way you can explain to someone
No.
how difficult it is to create a quality product, especially when it's important. Like getting it right is important. Like the analysis can't be sort of,
Can be glitchy or unreliable.
yeah, like it's important, but man, it's kind of like franchising. You learn so much about your craft when you put it in software.
Yeah.
It's like you learn it at a completely different level. And so we've been focused on flips from the beginning. We do some buy and hold rentals, but now we're really starting to lean into having the same model toward buy and holds. And so I've had my head down trying to develop that model and get that into the software, and it's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a chance to, go through your website before our
Yeah.
podcast, and going to New Again Houses, it looks like people can submit inquiries to say, hey, I want to sell my house.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Correct.
And that's all.
Yep.
And then that, depending on where you are nationwide or what part of the country you're in, you get those leads exclusively.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I think if I wasn't running an operation right now, I'd be like, where do I sign up?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for someone that's listening who's interested, like how would they express interest
Yeah.
in being a franchise owner?
Yeah. And that lead gen piece, what we've tried to do is lean into our competitive advantage of being a franchise. And so we really lean into we lean into the local. Because it's protected territories, we can put our local owner front and center as the hero, but then
That's great.
And then also the local unique content that Google values so much, right? So that's really difficult for franchises that don't have protected territories. They're really limited there. We really lean into that, and so
I like that.
We leverage the local content, but it's through the franchise site. And so we're able to boost the SEO because it's piggybacking on all of the other local sites. But we're able to go really deep into that local content and get ourselves recognized as Google, as we're trying to be the most credible local option on page one.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of there's a lot to it. Our process for becoming a franchise owner is about 5 weeks, and it's the same concept. We don't want people drinking from a fire hose. We don't want hasty decisions because it's a 10-year marriage. It's a 10-year agreement, and so we want to make sure it's the right cultural fit. And so it's a 5-week process. It's kind of a guided discovery, just like our training is. And it's at New Again Houses, and there's the franchise tab. There's always all kinds of different ways to find us.
So go to the New Again Houses website.
Yep.
Click on that franchise tab.
Yep.
Awesome. So one thing that's really cool, and I look forward to being able to do this. You came here with your son.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I'm not at a place yet where I can bring my kids with me.
Yeah.
But I look forward to that day.
Yeah.
Where I can. So talk to me, what was important about bringing your son with you here?
Yeah. He happens to have the real estate bug, and he's actually a fan of the podcast. He's listened to the podcast a lot. They're they got a pretty good wholesaling business going, and I think he's really learned a lot and using a lot of what he's learned from you. And so, I think we all, when entrepreneurs, you think there's a chance that one of your kids might enjoy what you enjoy, and so when that comes true, it's really rewarding. But I think being an entrepreneur, kids are inspired by that. Maybe it's what we do, but it could be something else.
Yeah.
But it is really rewarding, and we've always got something to talk about.
Yeah.
Spend time together with. Yeah.
You brought him here, went to the Suns game.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to the Grand Canyon. You're able to create not sure life experiences, but he gets to see what it's like when you run a business. He gets to see perks. Maybe he also gets to see the downsides, the negative days. But he gets a sneak peek before he has to commit to all of this.
Yeah. It's really cool. Like it's really rewarding, and I'm fortunate to have a lot of the same interests. We like a lot of the same things, and so it's a real privilege.
Yeah.
To be able to build something with your kids.
Is he the oldest?
He is. Yeah.
So my daughter's 12.
Yeah.
And I hope.
Yeah.
I'm not going to impose it on her, but I hope that she has that same bug too. She's a strong driver, stubborn as heck. So I feel like she's going to be either an entrepreneur or a salesperson. We'll see.
Yeah. It's so rewarding to see your kids, go from 12. That's when that was my favorite. It's been my favorite part of parenting is they just start to spread their wings and find their own path, and hopefully we do a good job and they're inspired by something we do so that they can find their thing. And it's really cool. We tried to, our big thing is we just wanted our kids to be independent. Like we wanted them to be able to go, we didn't want them to be helpless.
Yeah.
And be able to have confidence in going and taking on something new, and not be afraid by it, and have that independence.
I think I heard you guys saying he played soccer in college.
Yep. Yeah.
What position?
He's a midfielder. Yeah, I was a forward. All my kids are midfielders. But my two girls both played soccer too, and that's another thing. We're all massive Arsenal supporters. I have been for over 20 years. Our favorite place in the world is London.
Really?
Yeah. Massive Arsenal support. It's a good year. We're
completely disconnected.
Yeah.
There's only one team I'm paying attention to, and you can imagine why. It's that team in Miami.
Yeah, no, it's so good for the game in America. Yeah.
So, is this the first time you traveled with him, or are there other times you've traveled?
No, we've been a lot of places together.
So, for anyone that's listening, what is the most eye-opening thing about traveling, having your kids come along with you for your business ventures?
Oh, wow. I think, I guess I'm thinking back to nothing's easy, right? I think we look back and we see, some of us may see our parents try to put on a good face, like everything's easy, and they try to hide us from the hard parts of it. But if
they protect us.
They do protect us. And sometimes you don't really understand all of the struggles that your parents go through until later in life, or maybe you never, like I don't know all the struggles my dad had trying to manage working in a factory and building these businesses on the side, because he protected me from it. And I wish I'd have known. I could have learned so much from seeing him go through those struggles, right? But so none of this is easy. Like, anybody gets on this podcast and says, like, you have people that have built really big things here. If they're honest, none of it's easy. It doesn't get easy. It just gets more complicated, more responsibility. So I think sharing that with your kids and them actually like understanding like how hard it is, and the struggle and the perseverance and the persistence that it takes to like grind through solutions, and then them having the opportunity to do that themselves, and sometimes not being able to protect them from it, and they just have to work through it. Like it's a connection that I think a lot of people never had with their parents. That's unique if you sharing in a business.
Yeah.
And I would imagine like families that have a business together, you know, whether that's a dry cleaner or whatever, like they probably have a deeper connection and probably a deeper appreciation and respect for one another.
Yeah.
Through that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Definitely my parents did it, you know, they protected us.
Yeah.
I do remember their fights about money. Right?
Yeah.
I remember those fights.
Yeah.
Or at least the ones that were in front of us. You know, last year was pretty tough in real estate.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a conversation. You know, the girls are crying. They were acting spoiled, right? They're kids.
Yeah.
Right? They want to do this. They want to do this, right?
Yeah.
Without regard for budgets or anything else. And I had to sit down with them. It's like, hey, look, I understand you want to do this, this, and this. Look, I'm not discounting it, but here's also the reality of the situation, right? Like, moms and mortgages, not good times.
Yeah.
Dads in real estate, we're talking conversations about letting people go in the organization, right?
Yeah.
So I understand you want to go to Red Robin,
Yeah.
but right now,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of things we're worried about, right? And we had that conversation, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. But my wife's like, I think we're putting too much of reality on them. Like they're still young, right? I mean, like they're 6, 10, and 12 now, so 5, 9, 11 last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But I felt like they were getting a little entitled. And so they needed to like, we needed to hit them with a reality check.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but that's what we did.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just think, we could have another podcast on parenting ideas and how it relates to business and coaching.
Yeah.
But you know, I had the advantage of coaching early in life, and so I saw the end product of parenting because I coached, I recruited them and I coached them, and I took a lot of mental notes from like the parents that did that well.
Yeah, parenting styles.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would talk to them about it. Like, what was your philosophy here? And they didn't protect their kids. You know, like you gotta let them struggle and let them fail. And going back to coaching, like you can't learn without failure.
No, you cannot.
Like if we protect each other from failure, like we'll never be good at anything, right? Like struggle, but it's the failure that you learn from, but then just the perseverance to like get up, you know, get yourself up. And going back to Sean, like he articulated that so well. I think it was a couple weeks ago. He articulated that so well. Like you have to pick yourself. You have to pick yourself up, right?
So you noticed a trend between parents that let their kids experience failure and the resiliency within those kids. Is that, what you're saying?
Oh man, I still coach. Like I still coach club. And like the urge for parents today to protect their kids and not let them struggle through their own problems and find their own solutions. It's just cheating them. Like what is sports? Right? Like what is the benefit of sports? It's like that's adversity. Like where in life is some upper middle class kid in America going to experience adversity? Like in real life. Like they're not going through dark alleys.
No.
Right? Like they're not fighting their way out of their neighborhood.
No.
Like where are they going to experience adversity and learn persistence? Well, sports.
Yeah.
That's it. If we take that away from them, like if we take the adversity away, like what chance do they have? Because if you want to build something, if you want to spread your wings, like you're going to have to fail and pick yourself up, get through it.
Yeah. We're bringing on a recruiter, and her favorite place to recruit are former college athletes.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's like if they're not former college athletes or excelled in something else.
Yeah.
Right. So that the ability to persevere and excel. And you know, one of the things I was talking about was I was doing a presentation, about leadership
Yeah.
and how you have to let your people fail, and it sucks.
Uh-huh.
It sucks,
Uh-huh.
right? And people struggle with it, like
Yeah.
letting your team fail, especially because money's on the line when
Yeah,
you fail.
for sure.
But then I put it another way. It's like, well, how many helicopter parents are you like, man, I love the way they raise their kids?
No.
No one.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
If they're not letting their
Yeah.
kids fail, and you see like they're coddling their kids,
Yeah.
and their kids are not contributing members of society, you gotta
Yeah.
let your team members eat dirt sometimes so that they
You
can
have
solve
to.
problems.
Yeah, because I think back, like our flipping operation, like those guys weren't better than me on day one,
Right.
right? They got better than me, but it was because they made mistakes,
Mhm.
right? You learn from them, and you have to be. But coaching, like the hardest thing with coaching that I've found is the fear of failure for kids. So when you're coaching kids to do something, the lift of getting them to go outside their comfort zone and try something they're not good at, the hardest thing to overcome is the fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And until you create an environment where they're not afraid of failure, like you can't get from here to there. Like you can't develop
There's no shortcut.
that player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like you have to go through that. You have to go through that failure. But it takes a bit of courage to risk failure. And I think that's harder in today's world too, because your failure could end up on social media. Right?
Yeah.
Like so it's so important.
Well, I mean, there's one of the reasons why. So we offer coaching and mentorship and this and that. One of the things we don't do is you've never done a transaction before, we won't bring you on for coaching.
Yeah.
And that might sound, horrible, right? Like, like if you don't have experience, don't apply, right? That might sound terrible. But what I have found is if you haven't done a deal before, there's a lot of skills in overcoming, persevering, problem solving,
Yeah.
right? Like if you've never done a deal before, you've got a lot of mental baggage
Yeah.
that I don't feel qualified, right?
Yeah.
Or really the bandwidth to help as many people as possible
Yep.
with that struggle.
Yeah, the bandwidth is important, and I think that's wise. In our franchise system, like most of the people that come in have not done a deal, but we compensate for that by just a lot of support and training.
Ton of structure.
We surround them, structure,
Yeah.
guardrails, community. Like we really try to surround them with a village. And really try to overcompensate for that lack of experience. But there is no substitute for experience.
Yeah. So you got a lot of things going on, right?
Yeah.
Again, going back to, we were talking about headline, right? 23 states, 47 franchise owners. It's a big vision. And you talked about you have to have a vision big enough for others to see themselves in it.
Yep.
So what is your vision?
I think what I've learned from franchising is that people define that vision with a number. Like, I want to have 500 franchises. I have really tried to fight that. And I don't want to measure success in numbers. My why is I want to be a part of an organization that does something at the very highest level. Like I want to be a part of something that does it be the best at it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is quantity as much as quality.
Right.
And one of the things that I'm working through now is like, what is the optimal team size? Because you see these franchise systems that get really large really quick, and then they start hiring managers and then middle managers, and then they've got this whole bureaucracy before you. And that's what we're running from, right? Like, I don't want to recreate that. Like, I don't want to have 100 employees and 2,000 franchises.
No, your quality of life suffers.
Yeah, and like, so I keep coming back to like I think a small team has so many advantages. And thinking back to this past year in real estate, like the ground shifted under everybody's feet in 2022, right? And like if you didn't pivot fast, you got in trouble quick, right? Like it happened so fast. And so our advantage was that we were small, and I compare it to a jet ski. Like we were able to really pivot. We were able to switch strategies with inventory and really navigate that well. But if we had been like a big freight liner of an organization, we could not have gotten through that the way that we did.
Yeah.
And so when you think about building a business, like, what do you want that to look like? Well, maybe it's better to think, all right, what do I want my team to look like? Like, what is the ideal, best in class team look like? Is that 10 people? Is it 15 people? Is it 20 people? Let's figure out what that is, and then how big does the platform have to be to set them up for success?
Yeah.
And so we're still figuring that out, but it's not going to be, I don't think of it in terms of becoming some massive organization. That's not success to me.
Yeah. So going back to, though, you're mentioning like that, figuring out your why. What is your why?
I think it is really being a part of a world-class organization. I get so much satisfaction in that, and maybe it's not unlike coaching, because in coaching your greatest success is when you see players do it better than you could do it. Like that's the whole goal, and you want to celebrate that. And I see that as this thing that we're building. Like I want to empower. I truly want to empower not only our team, but the franchise owners to be better at this than we are.
Yeah. And
that has, I think that has always been my why. And it comes back to the teaching gene. Yeah.
Why do you think that's important? Well, why is that important to you?
It's a really good question that I don't have an answer for yet. And I think like I just turned 50 recently, and like I feel like this whole thing has been self-discovery. Like it's like a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Like I learned things about myself when I did the accounting internship, right? Like I learned a lot about myself. I learned like how much I didn't know about myself. Like I was going to be an accountant, and I hate accounting. But I learned stuff there. You learn stuff from the coaching and the teaching. You learn stuff in every decade. You learn stuff from parenting. But you what you really learn is about yourself, right? Like how much more do we learn to know about yourself after having kids?
A lot. Yeah.
They're still a mystery, but I learned a lot about about myself. But I think honestly I don't think I figured that out yet. Why that's my why.
Yeah, and
I think it'll change too. Like my why when I was in my 20s was different in my 30s. I outgrew my why. Right? That's why I needed to do something different.
Yeah.
Then my why was different in my 40s. And I hope my why is different in my 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking these questions because there's a lot of similarities. I can see like we have a lot of common interests.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of the same ambitions. But I still articulate at times, struggle at times to articulate why that's important to me.
You know, another answer to that question is this made a profound effect on me when I heard it. And it was Nick Saban talking about on a 60 Minutes episode. And they asked him something about team chemistry. And he said, the secret to team chemistry is having people with similar ambitions. If you have a team with people with different ambition levels, none of them will be happy. I heard that probably 10, 15 years ago, and it has stuck with me. And I think it's so true.
Yeah.
And I think part of my why in wanting to build that world-class team is because I want to have a team where are of similar ambition levels, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're surrounded by people that are more ambitious than you, they're going to be frustrated with you, right?
Yeah.
And there are people way more ambitious than me, but I value quality of life in a way that they don't, but they'd be frustrated with me.
Right.
So like building an organization and a culture that has those things in place, I think is part of what I'm wanting to do, but I haven't figured it out.
What's your biggest struggle today?
I think it's the responsibility. And when you coach, you can't separate the personal responsibility. It's very similar to parenting. Like in theory, you want to, you can't. And when people trust you and they come in, that I carry that responsibility. I'm sure you do with students that trust you, and that's a lot. It's a lot of responsibility. So kind of working through that, along with just the responsibilities of building stuff. So now, like, I've figured out at some point along the way, I need to be building things. But now you've got the responsibility of building them, not just for myself, but for other people too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What is your superpower?
I would say two things. I'm a really good listener, and I learned listening back in graduate school. I had an opportunity to work with World War II veterans in the VA hospital during graduate school, and I was there with them when they were dying. It was around 2000, so that was kind of what was happening. And you'd walk in this room, and you'd be you didn't know what was on the other side, but you knew it was a veteran, and they'd be getting things, limbs amputated and lonely and all those things. And I'm 23 years old.
Yeah.
And so the mentor of that program taught me active listening, which I know you've written on recently. Like, there is nothing that I can say that has any value to a veteran who has fought in Normandy and is dying.
Yeah.
Right? I'm 23. There's nothing I can offer. The only thing that I could do was listen. So I had to learn to listen, and he was really good at teaching me how to listen. And so I feel like I learned that there, and it's been so valuable throughout. The other thing is, I think there's just a relentlessness.
Yeah.
Like, when I see a problem that needs to be solved, I just don't let go of it until.
You're a bulldog.
Yeah, and maybe it's almost to a fault because I probably spend more time on some problems than I should have. But it's just that relentlessness. And
But you get the satisfaction when it's done.
yeah, and I maybe I got that from Dennis Rodman's rebounding.
Yeah. Or maybe that's why you're such a big fan.
Yeah, it could be. It could be like
Right. Relentlessness, tenacity. I mean, I loved it too, right? I wish I had his Energizer Bunny energy.
Yeah.
Right? Where you can go all out on every play. I wish I had that. I don't have that.
Yeah.
Right? I can go all out every 10th play. All right? But you can go out on every single play and not be tired. I mean, like, you've watched the Last Dance, right? I mean, he was going out drinking, and the next day he's
unbelievable.
He's at full capacity.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story? One story about Dennis Rodman. One thing, like, they asked him one time, like, he's the rebounding king, right? Like, they said, a journalist said, how do you rebound? And Rodman was like, what do you mean? How do I rebound? How do you dig a hole? You get a shovel and you start digging.
Yeah.
It's just
You just do it.
so many, like, there's a time where you do just have to pick up a shovel and
Get to work.
you dig,
Yeah.
like, especially in the beginning, right?
Right.
Like, you don't have an infrastructure, you don't have a team. Like, there's a time in life where you just have to pick up the shovel
Yeah.
and dig.
That's exactly. I mean, I said this a couple of times on today's show, right? The season of suffering. Like, everyone that's been on this show
Yeah.
has gone through a season of suffering. You can't
Yeah.
make it if you haven't suffered.
No,
Yeah.
you can't build anything without that part of it.
Yeah. So I want you to think about something you want to leave all the listeners with, right? Last thoughts. We'll make a couple of announcements. So guys, if you got value today, please subscribe. Do not keep us a secret. We are on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The more signals we tell YouTube, the more signals we tell Apple, iTunes that this is valuable content, the better, the more people we can reach, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. So guys, please subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. All right. So what are some last thoughts? We've gone through a lot of topics here.
Yeah.
Last thoughts you want to leave all the listeners with?
And I've thought a lot about the why with coaching and the parallels. We talked about parenting today, and I've asked myself, parents invest so much in their kids, they invest so much in sports. Why they do it? Like, what is the point of it? Like, they're not going to be professional athletes, right? And one of the things where I've landed in the past couple of years with coaching is maybe the point of it is to make them good teammates. And when you think about those qualities that came out in what the indicators of success for our franchise owners, self-management, relationship management, self-awareness, like, those are the qualities of a good teammate. And maybe and that's who we want to work with. Like, that's who we want to build teams with. That's who we want to enjoy success with, are good teammates. And so maybe that's the point of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today. And maybe that's what success looks like and this process looks like, is just learning how to be a better teammate. But then I also think that maybe success is intentionally surrounding yourself with good teammates.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. You want to be a valuable team member on a team where everyone wants to be contributing.
Yeah.
One of the things that, like, what do I want for my kids? I don't want money for them, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want happiness for them. Like, they're gonna have to find what happiness means to them.
Yep.
But what is important to me is that they're gonna be contributing members of society.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's what's important to me. Like, I want to, like, when I'm done, like, they're valuable people.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
They give more than they took. Being a good
Being a good teammate.
Yeah. Maybe all of this is that. Maybe it's that simple.
Yeah, maybe it is. If someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
newagainhouses.com. And or if you want to get directly in contact with me, it's Matt Lavender on LinkedIn. Lavender with an I. There's not many of us, so I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.
Shout out to Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. We real estate disruptors.